Stop for a second. Think about the last time you walked into a room and nobody adjusted. Nobody straightened their posture. Nobody lowered their voice. You spoke, and someone talked over you. You got irritated, and someone smirked. That's not random. That's hierarchy. And most men never realize they've been placed at the bottom of it. Most men are safe, predictable, domesticated. They traded their edge for comfort. They traded their backbone for approval. They learned very early that being agreeable keeps the peace, that being soft gets you invited back, that being harmless makes you acceptable. And so they declawed themselves. They sanded down their intensity. They shrank. But then there's the other type. You've seen him. You've felt him. He doesn't raise his voice, yet the room adjusts. He doesn't posture, yet space opens around him. He doesn't chase attention, yet attention locks onto him. Chaos lowers its volume when he steps in, not because everyone likes him, because something deeper recognizes him. Before we go further, if you already feel this shift happening inside you, if you know you're outgrowing the harmless version of yourself, subscribe now. Because what we're talking about here isn't surface-level self-improvement. It's transformation, and most men will never have the stomach for it. Let's clarify something immediately. When I say dangerous, I do not mean violent. Violence is loss of control. Violence is emotional weakness exploding outward. That's not power. I mean dangerous the way an iceberg is dangerous. Silent, immovable, massive. You don't see the depth until it's too late. It doesn't chase ships. It doesn't scream. It simply exists. And that existence alone is enough to sink something that thought it was unsinkable. A dangerous man cannot be emotionally hijacked. He cannot be guilted into obedience. He cannot be shamed into submission. He knows who he is. And because he knows who he is, no one else gets to define him. If you click this video, something inside you is shedding. You feel it. The old version of you, the people-pleasing, approval-seeking, conflict-avoiding version, is dying. And that death is uncomfortable. It should be. Growth is violent. It breaks skin. It tears identity. It forces you to confront parts of yourself you were trained to suppress. You might feel colder lately, more distant, less reactive, less apologetic. You aren't becoming cruel. You're becoming aware. Niccolo Machiavelli wrote for men who understood reality. He didn't write for the harmless. He wrote for the capable, for the men who accepted that the world is not a fairy tale. It is a system of power, incentives, strategy, and human nature. He called it virtù, not virtue as in moral purity, virtù as in skill, force, competence, effectiveness, the ability to see the world clearly and still move through it without flinching. And today, we're walking through the 7 signs that you are crossing that threshold, that you are no longer the sheep in the field, but something else entirely. This is not a list of tricks, not hacks, not motivational fluff. This is a diagnosis, and there is a final stage, a hidden cost, a sign number 0 that almost no one talks about. I'll reveal it at the end. Most men won't make it that far. Most men turn back when it starts to feel heavy. Let's see if you will. The first sign is painful. It feels like betrayal. It feels like you're losing something. It's the death of your need to be liked. For years, you were trained to be nice, be accommodating, be understanding, be the bigger person. Don't make waves. Smooth things over. Keep everyone comfortable. You were told the world rewards good behavior. But you've been watching. You've been paying attention. And you've noticed something. The guy who says yes to everything gets used. The guy who overextends gets overlooked. The guy who avoids conflict becomes the easiest target. The nice guy doesn't finish last because he's kind. He finishes last because his kindness is fear disguised as virtue. He's not choosing peace. He's avoiding discomfort. He's not being generous. He's trying to secure approval. His niceness is not strength. It's dependency. And you're starting to feel disgusted by that dependency in yourself. You're noticing something subtle but powerful. Your no is getting heavier. Before, when someone asked you for something you didn't want to give, time, money, emotional labor, you softened it. You made excuses. You lied to protect their feelings. You managed their reactions like it was your responsibility. Now, you just say no. Not aggressively, not emotionally, just no. No explanation, no apology, no performance, and people are uncomfortable. They say you've changed. They ask if something's wrong. They say you used to be more helpful. What they mean is, you used to be easier to access. You're not becoming heartless. You're becoming sovereign. You're realizing that your time is finite. Your energy is limited. Your attention is your most valuable asset, and you are done handing it out like free samples. This shift feels cold because it removes illusion. You stop confusing love with validation. You stop confusing harmony with submission. You stop confusing being good with being weak. Machiavelli wrote that it is safer to be feared than loved, not because fear is moral, but because love built on obligation collapses the moment it becomes inconvenient. Respect rooted in consequence is far more stable than affection rooted in dependency. Look at your life honestly. How many times did loyalty go unreturned? How many times did your consistency get taken for granted? How many times did someone pivot the moment a better option appeared? That realization hardens you, not into bitterness, into clarity. You begin cutting off what drains you, conversations that waste your focus, relationships that only exist when you're useful, habits that make you weaker. You don't explode, you don't argue, you just close the door, quietly. And that quiet decisiveness is the first true sign that you are no longer harmless. The second sign is subtle, but once it locks in, everything changes. You stop reacting. Look at the average man in America today. He's constantly stimulated. Notifications, news alerts, social media outrage, traffic, office politics, dating apps. He lives in a permanent state of micro-reaction. Someone cuts him off. Instant anger. His boss sends a passive-aggressive message. Instant anxiety. A woman leaves him on read. Instant insecurity. The stock market dips. Instant panic. He is a bundle of exposed nerves. Anyone can press his buttons. Anyone can hijack his state. But something different is happening to you. There's a gap forming. An event happens. And instead of immediate emotional combustion, there's the space. A pause. A moment of silence inside your own mind. You observe before you respond. You feel before you act. That pause is power. Machiavelli spoke of the lion and the fox. The lion represents brute force. Loud, direct, reactive. The fox represents strategy. Aware, patient, adaptive. Most men try to be lions. They puff their chest. They bark. They dominate conversations. But they walk straight into traps. You are becoming the fox. You're developing what I call emotional 0 point. A baseline so steady that outside chaos struggles to move it. Someone insults you, and instead of defending yourself instantly, you look at them, you assess. Is this worth my energy? Is this a test? Is this projection? And sometimes you don't respond at all. That silence unsettles people, because manipulators rely on reaction. The toxic partner relies on you defending yourself. The narcissistic boss relies on you scrambling for approval. The insecure friend relies on you reassuring them. The online troll relies on your outrage. When you don't give them the reaction, their leverage evaporates. You become difficult to move. And when a man becomes difficult to move, he becomes dangerous. This doesn't mean you're numb. It doesn't mean you don't feel. It means you understand something critical. Emotions are information, not commands. Anger tells you something. Fear tells you something. Disrespect tells you something. But none of them dictate your behavior. You treat your emotions like dashboard lights in a car. If something flashes red, you don't smash the steering wheel. You diagnose. You adjust. That level of regulation is rare. In relationships, this shift is massive. When tension rises, you don't beg for reassurance. When conflict appears, you don't spiral. When someone tries to provoke jealousy, you don't chase. You observe. You let them reveal themselves. And the more you do this, the calmer you become in moments that used to shake you. Financial setback. Instead of, why me? You think, what's the move? Break up. Instead of collapse, you think, what did I learn? Public embarrassment. Instead of humiliation, you think, interesting. Who needed that performance? You shift from victim to strategist. This is where most men around you start to feel the difference. They sense you're harder to read, harder to trigger, harder to control. They test you, they poke, they escalate slightly just to see if you'll break character. You don't. And something in them recalibrates. Because dominance isn't about volume, it's about stability. The man who remains composed under pressure unconsciously becomes the reference point in the room. In crisis, people look to the calmest person. Not the loudest, not the angriest, the calmest. You're building internal infrastructure. Machiavelli described fortune, fate, as a wild river. The weak man gets swept away. The prepared man builds channels, barriers, systems. Emotional control is your dam. It prevents the flood from carrying you off course. You speak slower now. You choose words more carefully. You don't rush to fill silence. You're comfortable letting tension hang in the air. In negotiations, this is lethal. The man who talks first often gives away his position. The man who waits forces the other side to reveal more. Silence becomes your ally. And this emotional zero point does something else that most people don't expect. It removes desperation. When you are no longer emotionally reactive, you stop chasing validation. You stop over-explaining. You stop performing for approval. You don't need immediate reassurance because your internal state isn't dependent on external response. That independence makes you magnetic. People feel it. They don't always understand it, but they feel it. Because most of society operates on stimulus response, trigger reaction, outrage engagement, drama attention. And when someone refuses to participate in that cycle, it creates gravity. You become the man who can stand in the middle of noise and remain still. And stillness is intimidating. But understand this clearly. This is not suppression. Suppression leads to explosion. This is integration. You acknowledge your anger. You acknowledge your pride. You acknowledge your competitive edge. You just don't let them run you. You drive them. That's the shift. The world is trying constantly to program your nervous system. News cycles designed to provoke fear. Social media designed to provoke comparison. advertising designed to provoke inadequacy. If you react to everything, you are programmable. If you pause before responding, you become unprogrammable. And an unprogrammable man cannot be domesticated. You're starting to feel that armor forming. Not coldness, not cruelty, control. The kind of control that allows you to walk through chaos without absorbing it. The kind that makes other men slightly uneasy because they don't know how to get under your skin anymore. If this is happening to you, don't reverse it. Don't apologize for it. Don't let someone shame you into being more emotional just so they feel comfortable. You are not disconnecting from life. You are mastering your interface with it. And that mastery sets the stage for something even more disruptive. Because once you stop reacting, you start seeing clearly. And clarity changes everything. Tell me something in the comments. Have you noticed yourself becoming harder to trigger? Or are you still working on that? Pause. I read everyone. Now let's move deeper. The third sign is uncomfortable. It feels almost like disillusionment, like something sacred is breaking. You stop putting people on pedestals. When you were younger, you looked up. You looked up to your father, to teachers, to politicians, to celebrities, to billionaires, to the woman you were obsessed with. You believed they were operating on a different level, smarter, wiser, more complete. You assumed they had access to something you didn't. But now you're looking again, and the illusion is cracking. You look at your father, and instead of seeing a flawless authority, you see a man who was improvising. You see his fears, his blind spots, his limitations. You look at politicians, and instead of seeing leaders, you see incentives, power plays, branding. You look at wealthy men, and instead of assuming genius, you see leverage, timing, risk tolerance, sometimes luck, sometimes ruthlessness. And in relationships, the shift is even sharper. The woman you once worshipped, the one you overthought, overinvested in, overanalyzed. You now see her as human, not an angel, not a savior, not a prize above you. Human, flawed, emotional, strategic in her own ways. This is a massive psychological upgrade because you cannot negotiate with someone you worship. You cannot lead someone you pedestalize. You cannot outmaneuver someone you think is superior. Machiavelli did something radical for his time. He stripped politics of divinity. He looked at kings and popes and said, "These are not holy beings chosen by fate. They are men playing power games." Once you see that, the spell breaks. That's what's happening inside you. You're stripping the sacred coating off the world. At first, it feels cynical. It feels like you're losing innocence. It feels like the magic is gone. But it's not cynicism. It's maturity. When you remove the pedestal, you remove intimidation. When you remove intimidation, you gain freedom. Now when your boss raises his voice, you don't shrink internally. You analyze. What's his leverage? What's his insecurity? What pressure is he under? You see behavior, not authority. You see strategy, not status. That shift alone changes how you carry yourself. In dating, this is where everything flips. The average man approaches women from a lower frame. He seeks validation. He performs. He overinvests early. He tries to prove his worth. And because he's subconsciously positioning her above him, she feels it. You're not doing that anymore. You respect women, but you don't worship them. You're not trying to buy approval with attention, money, or constant reassurance. You're evaluating too. You're observing. You're deciding whether she aligns with your standards. And that subtle recalibration changes the energy completely. Because for the first time you're not asking, how do I impress her? You're asking, is she worthy of access to my time? That is dangerous, not arrogant, not disrespectful, grounded. You're realizing something powerful about hierarchy. Most hierarchies exist because people agree to them psychologically. The moment you stop internally accepting someone's elevated status, their external status loses influence over you. This doesn't mean you become rebellious for the sake of it. It means you stop being hypnotized by titles, wealth, followers, beauty. You look at incentives. You look at character. You look at behavior. And here's the deeper layer. When you remove people from pedestals, you also remove yourself from the floor. You stop thinking of yourself as the underdog in every room. You stop assuming others are more competent, more confident, more deserving. You realize most people are improvising. Most people are insecure. Most people are figuring it out as they go. That awareness does something profound. It equalizes the field. You're no longer a fan in the audience. You're a player in the arena. And players don't worship other players. They compete. They collaborate. They negotiate. But they don't kneel. This is why some people start reacting strangely to you at this stage. They sense you're no longer seeking their approval. They sense you're no longer impressed. And for individuals who built their identity on being admired, that shift is unsettling. They might call you distant. They might call you arrogant. They might say you've changed. You have. Because admiration without discernment is weakness. You're learning to respect competence, not status. Discipline, not branding. Integrity, not performance. You see through charisma when it's hollow. You see through authority when it's insecure. You see through beauty when it's manipulative. And once you see through it, you cannot unsee it. This is where many men retreat. Because living without illusions is heavy. It removes fantasy. It removes naive optimism. It removes the comfort of believing someone else has the answers. But here's the reward. When you stop searching for heroes, you start building yourself. When you stop worshiping kings, you start sharpening your own crown. You're no longer looking up. You're looking across, and that level eye contact, that equal footing, is something most men never experience. If you've felt this shift, if you've noticed the pedestal cracking in your own life, drop a comment and tell me what illusion broke for you. Was it a relationship, a mentor, a public figure? I want to know, because once the pedestal falls, the next transformation becomes even more visible, and this is the one other people start noticing first. The fourth sign is the one people around you notice before you even say a word. You become quieter, not socially awkward, not withdrawn, strategic. In a world where everyone is broadcasting, you start withholding. Scroll through any platform in the United States right now, and you'll see it. Everyone documenting everything. What they ate, what they think, who they're dating, what they plan to build, their trauma, their arguments, their victories, their breakdowns, constant exposure. Most men leak information without realizing they're giving away leverage. You're not doing that anymore. You stop announcing your goals before they're built. You stop explaining your next move before it's executed. You stop venting your frustrations publicly for temporary sympathy. You stop telegraphing your emotions in real time. You move differently. Machiavelli understood something timeless. Information is power. The man who reveals everything is predictable. The man who is predictable is controllable. you're becoming harder to read. When you're working on something significant, you don't post about the grind. You don't seek applause halfway through. You build in silence, and then one day, you present results. When you're going through something painful, you don't broadcast your wounds. You process privately. You strengthen quietly. You heal without spectacle. When you win, you don't brag. You just upgrade. That silence creates psychological tension around you. People start wondering what you're thinking, what you're planning, what you know. When a man talks constantly, there's nothing left to imagine. But when he withholds, imagination fills the gaps. And imagination is powerful. In negotiations, this is lethal. The first person to overshare usually loses. The one who asks questions and reveals little maintains position. The one who tolerates silence forces the other side to speak more, often revealing insecurity, strategy, or desperation. You're getting comfortable with silence. You no longer rush to fill awkward pauses. You no longer over-explain to avoid misunderstanding. You no longer defend yourself against every accusation. Sometimes you just look at someone, and that look does more than paragraphs ever could. People interpret your silence differently. Some assume confidence, some assume calculation, some project their own fears onto you. That projection works in your favor, because while they're guessing, you're observing, you're conserving energy. Most men spend enormous mental bandwidth explaining themselves, clarifying, justifying, proving. You're realizing something simple. The people who understand you don't need constant explanation. The people who don't understand you won't be convinced anyway. So you choose precision over noise. This shift also applies to your past. You stop trauma dumping for validation. You stop leading conversations with your struggles, not because you're ashamed, but because you understand the world isn't obligated to handle your emotional weight. On a battlefield, you don't show the enemy where you're bleeding. That doesn't mean you never open up. It means you choose carefully who earns access to that depth. You're becoming selective. Selective with words. Selective with vulnerability. Selective with exposure. And that selectiveness creates mystery. Friends start asking, "What's he working on lately?" And no one has a full answer. They sense movement, but can't see the details. That uncertainty builds presence. Then suddenly you reappear different, stronger, leaner, more skilled, financially upgraded, mentally sharper. While they were announcing intentions, you were executing. Silence becomes your incubator. Noise becomes something you avoid. This is also why you stop arguing online. You stop debating strangers in comment sections. You stop reacting to every headline designed to provoke outrage. You understand that attention is currency, and you refuse to spend it recklessly. The algorithm feeds on reaction. You starve it. That restraint makes you harder to manipulate politically, socially, emotionally. You're no longer pulled into every trending controversy. You're not signaling virtue to strangers for validation. You're focused on your state, your body, your finances, your network, your discipline. And because you're not broadcasting constantly, when you do speak, it carries more weight. Scarcity increases value. When a man talks non-stop, his words dilute. When a man speaks deliberately and rarely, people listen. You're learning to sit back in conversations, to observe dynamics, to see who dominates, who submits, who postures, who seeks approval. You collect data quietly. And here's what's fascinating. The quieter you become, the more others reveal themselves around you. People fill silence with confession. They tell you more than they intended. They expose insecurities. They reveal motivations. They show their hands, all because you were patient enough not to overplay yours. This is where average men start calling you different. They feel the shift. They sense you're not as accessible, not as emotionally available on demand, not as predictable, and unpredictability is powerful. But this isn't about playing games. It's about understanding that broadcasting your entire inner world makes you easy to control. You're choosing depth over display. If you've noticed yourself speaking less but thinking more, if you've felt that urge to build quietly instead of perform publicly, comment silence below. I want to see who's moving differently, because the next sign goes even deeper, and this is where most men get uncomfortable. The fifth sign is the one society pretends doesn't exist. You start acknowledging your capacity for violence, not recklessness, not chaos, capacity. For years, you were told that being civilized meant being soft, that aggression was toxic, that dominance was dangerous, that masculinity needed to be diluted to be acceptable. So you suppressed it. You pretended you had no teeth. But here's the uncomfortable truth. A man who is incapable of harm is not virtuous. He's harmless. There's a difference. When you begin integrating this part of yourself, something shifts internally. You stop denying your aggression. You stop pretending you don't feel competitive. You stop apologizing for wanting to win, to conquer, to protect, to dominate your craft. You don't become reckless. You become controlled. There's a psychological transformation that happens when you know, not fantasize, but know, that you can defend yourself, that you can handle physical confrontation if necessary, that you can endure discomfort, that you can impose force if pushed to the edge. That knowledge changes your nervous system. You become calmer. You start training, lifting heavy weight, learning discipline through your body. Maybe boxing, maybe jiu-jitsu, maybe just pushing yourself harder than before. Not because you're looking for fights, but because you want competence. You want to know that if chaos knocks, you're not fragile. The Chihuahua barks constantly because it's insecure. The lion doesn't need to announce itself. When you integrate your aggression, you stop posturing. You stop trying to look tough. You don't need to intimidate anyone. The energy becomes internal, stable, grounded. Machiavelli understood something simple. There is no true comparison between the armed and the unarmed. Translate that to modern America. The armed man isn't just the one with weapons. It's the man with skills, with money, with physical competence, with psychological control, with options. Options are power. You're building options. And with that, your kindness becomes a choice, not a survival tactic. That's the difference. If you cannot enforce boundaries, your kindness is just fear. If you cannot walk away, your loyalty is just dependency. If you cannot survive alone, your relationships are just attachments. You are training the monster not to unleash it recklessly, but to have it under voluntary control. That integration fuels the sixth sign, ruthless prioritization. Time starts to feel different to you. You look around and see men bleeding, hours every single day, scrolling endlessly, arguing online, watching outrage content, debating celebrity scandals, consuming content instead of building competence. You can't unsee it. You begin measuring everything by return on investment. Not just money, energy, focus, discipline. Before committing to something, you ask, Does this sharpen me or dull me? Does this move me forward or keep me stationary? If it dulls you, you cut it. You stop following drama. You stop engaging in pointless debates. You reduce contact with people who drain your ambition. You become selective with entertainment. You stop chasing every distraction designed to hijack your dopamine. Average people start calling you obsessed. Let them. Obsession is what average people call disciplined focus. You realize that killing time is killing potential. Every hour spent in mediocrity compounds in the wrong direction. So you start compounding upward instead. While others are distracted, you're drilling. While others are entertained, you're studying. While others are complaining, you're building. You're becoming efficient. Like a sniper. One shot. No wasted motion. This creates distance between you and the herd. They sense you pulling away. They sense the gap widening. And that gap makes them uncomfortable. Because your discipline highlights their inconsistency. They may try to pull you back down, invite you into distraction, mock your seriousness, call you extreme. That's the cost of moving differently. Which brings us to the 7th sign. Solitude stops scaring you. In fact, you begin craving it. Most men cannot sit alone for 10 minutes without reaching for a screen. Silence terrifies them. It forces them to face unresolved thoughts. In solitude, there's no applause, no validation, no distraction. But you're starting to value it. Your best ideas come when you're alone. Your clarity sharpens when there's no noise. Your nervous system resets when there's no external demand pulling at you. You stop needing constant social proof. You stop fearing exile. And this is where you become untouchable. Social pressure only works if you fear being excluded. If you don't comply, we won't invite you. If you don't agree, we'll criticize you. If you don't conform, we'll label you. But when you are comfortable alone, those threats lose power. You can speak truth without trembling. You can take risks without fearing embarrassment. You can walk away from environments that don't align with you. You're building a fortress inside yourself. Not isolation, sovereignty. People can enter your life. They can orbit your world, but they are not your foundation. If they leave, you don't collapse. You adjust. You continue. You become self-sustaining. Like the sun, you generate your own energy. Others may benefit from your warmth, but you don't depend on them to shine. If you recognize these signs in yourself, the death of the nice guy, emotional control, removal of pedestals, weaponized silence, integration of aggression, ruthless focus, acceptance of solitude. Understand something. You cannot go back. And here is the hidden cost. The sign number 0. Once you see the world through power, incentives, psychology, and strategy, you cannot unsee it. You will analyze more. You will observe more. You will notice manipulation where others see be coincidence. You will recognize games being played in conversations most people think are casual. Ignorance was lighter, but awareness is stronger. This path is not about becoming cruel. It's about becoming capable. The world doesn't need more harmless men. It needs men strong enough to confront chaos without becoming it. If this resonated, don't just watch silently. Comment below which sign hit you hardest. Share this with a man who's ready to stop being domesticated. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. Because this is only the surface of what we can talk about publicly. There are deeper layers to power, to influence, to human nature. Most will scroll past. You won't. The door is open. Walk through it.